Hey, this is an audio reading of the chapters 6 through 10 assignments. You can follow along with your homework pages or just listen in. So let's get into it. I'm going to read each question and give you a chance to think about what the answer might be, and then I'll read the answer. Alright, Chapter 6. This first question is a true or false question. If you compress a gas to a smaller volume, you will have lower pressure. True or false? The answer is false. If you compress a gas to a smaller volume, you will have a higher pressure. Higher density typically leads to what pressure? The answer is higher. Higher density typically leads to higher pressure. Average sea level pressure is approximately blank MB. I think that's MB stands for millibars. The answer is 1013.25 millibars. The average sea level pressure is approximately 1013.25 millibars. True or false? If a gas cools, the molecules become more energetic. The answer is false. Which of the following is not a way to measure atmospheric pressure? A mercury barometer, an aneroid barometer, an anemometer barometer, or all of these measure pressure? The answer is an anemometer. It is not used to measure pressure. It's used to measure wind speed. True or false? The lower the elevation, the less correction for pressure is needed. The answer is true. Wind is measured by two factors, wind blank and blank. So what are the two factors that are used to measure wind? The answer is speed, wind speed, and direction. We measure wind direction by where the wind is blowing to. True or false? The answer is false. We measure wind by where it is coming from. In a low-pressure system in the northern hemisphere, surface winds blow The answer is counterclockwise and inward. Low-pressure systems in the northern hemisphere blow counterclockwise and inward. In a high-pressure system in the northern hemisphere, surface winds blow which way? The answer is clockwise and outward. Clouds are usually associated, this is a true or false question. Clouds are usually associated with high-pressure systems. True or false? The answer is false. They are not associated with high-pressure systems. True or false, closer isobars typically mean stronger gradients and stronger winds. The answer is true. When you see a lot of isobars compacted together, that means you're going to see stronger winds. True or false, if there is high pressure aloft, there is typically a low pressure at the surface. The answer is true, because the pressure aloft is the opposite of the pressure at the surface. So if there's a high aloft, it's low at the surface. If there's a low aloft, it's high at the surface. Air pressure flows from blank pressure to blank pressure. Air pressure flows from high pressure to low pressure. In the northern hemisphere, the Coriolis force deflects to the what direction? The Coriolis force deflects to the right. What two variables are in the equation for pressure? Pressure equals what divided by what? The answer is force and area. Pressure equals force divided by area. What are the three forces that affect wind? It's pressure gradient force, Coriolis force, and friction. This force is found only at the surface and not aloft. The answer is friction, because there's no friction in the air aloft. True or false, high and low pressure systems typically rotate the opposite in the southern hemisphere compared to the northern hemisphere. True, because the southern hemisphere rotates in reverse to the northern hemisphere. Why do the poles tend to have greater pressure compared to the equator? This is a write-in question, so your answer might be a little bit different, but it should be generally similar to because the poles have a thinner troposphere, which compresses the gases and molecules. Alright, that is all of Chapter 6. Let's move on to Chapter 7. List 4 types of local winds. I think there are more than 4, so you have some options here. I have sea breezes, mountain breezes, land breezes, and Chinook winds. Pressure on land during the day, in reference to land and sea breeze, tends to be lower. Pressure on land during the day is lower. They both start with an L, so land, lower, during the day. Match the following wind weather type with its associated scale of scale. So there's microscale, mesoscale, and macroscale. And the options are trade winds, dust devils, and tornadoes. I'll let you think about that. Which one is microscale? Which one is mesoscale? And which one is macroscale? So dust devils are microscale, tornadoes are mesoscale, and trade winds are macroscale. True or false? Global winds are a composite of motion on all scales. The answer is true. True or false? The ITCZ tends to be in the southern hemisphere during January. The answer is true. True or false? There is a single cell and a 3-cell global circulation model. The answer is true. The 3 cells of global wind circulation are what, and what? The 3 cells. Remember, 2 of them are named after people. It's Hadley, Ferrel, and Polar. True or false? The ITCZ is typically associated with clear skies. That's false. It is not associated with clear skies. Going from the equator to the North Pole, what is the sequence of pressure systems? Now pay attention. It's from the equator to the North Pole. The answer is low, high, low, high. If you were thinking about the high, low song, that's from the pole to the equator. What wind belt is Port Huron in? Port Huron is in the westerlies. True or false? The tropopause is typically lower above the polar cell. The answer is true. True or false? Monsoon always means a wet season. The answer is false. It does not always mean a wet season. True or false? A monsoon occurs somewhere in the United States. The answer is true. We do have monsoons in the United States. A jet stream is classified as narrow bands of what? High wind velocity. They are narrow bands of high wind velocity. The 2 jet streams we have in the United States are what and what? The 2 jet streams are the polar jet stream and the subtropical jet stream. True or false? the two jet streams stay in the same place year-round? The answer is false. They don't stay in the same place. Why do the jet streams shift throughout the year? This is a write-in answer, so you might have a different answer, but something similar to because of temperature shifts due to solar heating changes. True or false? As we continue to progress through the rest of the semester, the jet streams will progress south. That's false, because the jet streams do not progress south in the spring and summer. El Niño events typically bring blank than normal sea surface temperatures to the equatorial Pacific off the coast of blank. El Niño events typically bring warmer than normal sea surface temperatures to the equatorial Pacific off the coast of South America. La Niña is a strengthening of blank conditions and is the blank of El Niño. La Niña is a strengthening of normal conditions and is the opposite of El Niño. That's all for Chapter 7. Now for Chapters 8 and 9. An air mass is classified by what and what? The answer is temperature and humidity. Air masses are classified by temperature and humidity. Those are those two letters. An air mass originates in the answer is source regions. An air mass originates in source regions. That's also where it gets its name. The source of the air mass is what it gets its name from. Match the following air mass with its associated classification. There's continental tropical, continental polar, continental arctic, maritime polar, and maritime tropical. A, continental tropical, is hot and dry. B, continental polar, is cold and dry. C, continental arctic, is very cold and dry. D, maritime polar, is cool and humid. E, maritime tropical, is warm and humid. True or false? Continental polar only forms in the northern hemisphere. The answer is true. This is another true or false. Maritime polar air masses can sometimes start out as continental polar air masses. The answer is true. because the CP can get modified to an MP. True or false, the maritime tropical air mass over the Gulf and Atlantic Ocean is only active in the fall and winter? The answer is false. The three types of air masses that form over land are what, and what? The three types of air masses that form over land are continental polar, continental tropical, and continental Arctic. True or false, a continental tropical air mass typically has a large source region. The answer is false. A continental tropical air mass does not have a large source region. What are the four main types of fronts? The four main types of fronts are warm, cold, stationary, and occluded. Cold fronts are typically an interaction between what air masses? They are CP and MT, continental polar and maritime tropical. True or false, winds ahead of a cold front are southerly and behind the cold front are easterly? The answer is false. True or false, warm fronts typically have a more gradual slope compared to cold fronts? That is true. Warm fronts, here's another true or false. Warm fronts move faster than cold fronts. That is false. Warm fronts are slower than cold fronts. A dry line forms between a what and a what air mass? If you think about the two air masses, a dry line forms between a continental tropical and a maritime tropical air mass. What are the four stages to a mid-latitude cyclone? The four stages are cyclogenesis, open stage, occluded stage, and dissolving stage. Which stage of the mid-latitude cyclone is the strongest? The strongest stage is the occluded stage. Which way do mid-latitudes tend to move throughout the United States, and why? This is a write-in question, so you might have something a little bit different, but it should sound somewhat like they tend to move west to east because continental winds from the west-northwest push it toward the east. Upper air analysis. This is a true or false. Upper air analysis can help meteorologists determine whether the surface weather will move. The answer is true, because you can see what's going on with the aloft air, the aloft pressure, to tell what is going on at the surface. True or false, mid-latitude cyclones tend to form upstream of an upper level ridge. The answer is false. They do not form like that. They do not form upstream of an upper level ridge. True or false, mid-latitude cyclones are further north in the United States in the winter. That is false. That is all for chapters 8 and 9. So let's move on to assignment 9, chapter 10. The three main ingredients for thunderstorms are what, and what? Three main ingredients for thunderstorms. The three main ingredients are moisture, instability, and a lifting mechanism. When water vapor condenses, large amounts of energy are released. When water vapor condenses, large amounts of energy are released. What are the three stages of thunderstorm development? The three stages are the developing cumulus stage, the mature stage, and the dissipating stage. A severe thunderstorm needs an additional ingredient, which is what? A severe thunderstorm needs shear. In the first stage of a thunderstorm, the collision coalescence process builds precipitation, which is supported by updrafts and cold clouds. This is a true or false question. The answer is false. That is not the first stage of a thunderstorm. True or false, the first stage of a thunderstorm has many downdrafts to help with cloud formation. That is false. If I remember correctly, it has updrafts. What and what are side by side, and precipitation begins to fall during the second stage of the thunderstorm. Updrafts and downdrafts are side by side, and precipitation begins to fall during the second stage of the thunderstorm. Entrainment in the second stage of a thunderstorm is the process of the influx of warm, moist air. True or false? That is false. During the last stage of a thunderstorm, what dominates, and thus the storm loses its supply of energy? During the last stage of a thunderstorm, downdrafts and entrainment dominates, and thus the storm loses its supply of energy. Which stages of a thunderstorm development have rain and/or thunderstorms? That's 2 and 3, the mature stage and the dissipating stage, because that first stage, where it's developing, does not have rain yet. Which state has the most thunderstorm days? That would be Florida. Yeah. True or false? Lightning can heat the air around it to more than 30,000 Celsius. That is true. True or false? There are global seasonal variations in lightning. That is also true. The highest frequency of derechoes occur from when to when in Iowa across Illinois in the Ohio River Valley. The highest frequency of derechoes occur from May to August in Iowa across Illinois into the Ohio River Valley. What are the 3 basic requirements for the formation of a tornado? Instability at the surface, vertical wind shear, and a mesocyclone. Pulses off the bottom of the parent cloud are called a what? They are called a funnel cloud. Sometimes they might look like a tornado in the air, but they're not, because they have to touch the ground first. Which way do mid-latitudes tend to move throughout the United States, and why? This is a write-in question, so you'll have your own answer. I put down mid-latitude cyclones tend to move west to east because they are pushed toward the east by westerly winds. On the enhanced fajita scale, an EF3, so this is a true or false question, I don't know if I mentioned that. An EF3 has winds ranging from 166 to 200 miles per hour. True or false? Is an EF3 166 to 200 miles per hour? Winds that strong, I looked at the chart. 166 to 200 miles per hour is an EF4. An EF3 would be 136 to 165. So that is false. True or false? About 1% of tornadoes are EF4 or EF5. That is true. They're pretty rare when they're that powerful. Very destructive, too. True or false? Globally, tornadoes are most common in Europe. Nope, that's false. True or false? There is a Tornado Alley and Dixie Alley in the United States. That is true. True or false? A tornado warning occurs when conditions are favorable for a tornado to form. True or false? That is false. It might seem like maybe like I had wondered to myself if because a tornado watch is when conditions are favorable for a tornado to form, a tornado warning could come after a watch. I don't know if you can have a tornado warning without a tornado watch. I suppose you probably can. And it's not the same thing because a tornado warning occurs when someone actually sees the tornado. A tornado watch is when conditions are favorable for a tornado to form. What are the 3 weather systems that produce tornadoes? The 3 weather systems are cold fronts, tropical cyclones, and single cell and more powerful thunderstorms. And that is all for the homework review. You guys are going to do great. So, yeah. Good luck, have fun, learn lots of things.